This is segment 2 of chapter 1. Segment 1 dealt with public speaking essentials for excellence. Segment 2 now deals with public speaking and the communication process. A good definition of communication is that it is the creation of shared meaning using symbolic processes, meaning using words, taking ideas, encoding them into words per se. So it's about shared meaning. You and I communicate our thoughts and our feelings with an audience for a specific purpose. There's always a reason for communicating, and that is to generate knowledge first, and also to influence others. There's a sense in which all of communication is about persuasion, about influencing others in terms of their beliefs, attitudes, and values, and also their actions. So the speeches that we deliver will fall basically into 3 categories, as I mentioned earlier. The first is to inform, the second is to persuade, and the third is those special occasion speeches where we entertain, we inspire, a variety of things that we are involved in. Let's get right into the nuts and bolts of what the process is all about. This is a little bit more technical, but it's intuitive. 8 elements to the communication process. The first one is sender-receiver. And there's a sense in which maybe those terms are ambiguous in some sense, because in a communication setting, when 2 people are conversing, they're both sending at the same time, and there's a sense in which they're both receiving at the same time. So sometimes the lines blur as to who's the sender and who's the receiver. Anyway, for both the sender and the receiver, we both bring something unique to the occasion. We bring the way we view the world, our perception of the world. And my reality is my perception. I bring my perspective to an issue, and whatever that issue is, I look at it with a particular pair of lenses, you might say. There's certain things about you that are static in terms of wherever you go, those things won't change. And there's certain things about you that will change. Those are dynamic variables. So the static variables are your race, sex, age. Your experience is not necessarily static, and neither is your knowledge, because that does change in some ways. The dynamic variables are all the decisions you make about a particular speech, your word choice, the structure you choose to support your points, and even your appearance may change from one setting to the next. So static and dynamic variables are a little bit helpful in terms of defining them that way. Your image, your persona, the sense of who you are and how you carry yourself, makes a statement, and be sure to keep this in mind. It is about self-performance, self-display. The image your audience has of you is shaped largely by you, by the way you dress, by the way you carry yourself, the statements that you make throughout the presentation. And the audience is continuing to size you up, the audience continually sizes you up. So when you speak, your words and your style of delivery communicate your passion about the topic, your involvement with that topic, and it takes the audience just a few minutes. That initial impression usually is long-lasting, where they will pass judgment on your confidence, your knowledge, your integrity, and your skill. So both the sender and the receiver both have needs. Remember again that the speech is about you and your audience. So depending on the situation, your needs might include being understood, having influence, bring about action in terms of the audience, to be liked, to be respected. The impact of a speech in terms of you, the sender of the communication, depends on whether you are viewed as believable, second, trustworthy, third, competent, fourth, sincere, and fifth, confident. So the audience continually sizes you up in terms of your credibility. Now we flipped it around. First one was sender, receiver. Now we flipped it around in terms of the receiver and sender. The receiver is the target of the audience, you might say. Just as the sender has his own frame of reference, so the receiver bring their own frame of reference, which is also influenced by their race, gender, age, health, personality, knowledge, experience, all those things that make you as the receiver, as the audience, who you are. Now again, both the speaker and the audience, both really have an obligation or responsibility of achieving mutual understanding. As the listener, your primary role is to interpret the speaker's message. That's your primary role. And so you have to ensure that you filter out all those things that can distract you from your primary role. We'll get more to that. We'll get more into that when we talk about noise. On the other hand, receivers also communicate. They don't stand motionless as a target, waiting to be shot at. They also send messages. Sometimes it's verbal, but mostly it's non-verbal while the speaker presents his or her message. That's what we call feedback. And that feedback is relevant and vital to the speaker. It lets the speaker know that he or she is being understood. It's time to wrap up. The speech was funny. Or maybe there's something that's confusing about what you just said. So the receiver is not a passive participant being shot at in the communication process. The third element is the message. The message is what is communicated by the speaker and it's perceived by the audience. And this is not only in terms of what you intend to say, but it's also unintentional in terms of your nonverbal. It's what the audience ascribes to what you have said. It's the meaning that they get. And sometimes it's not what you intended. So you and I have to work very carefully to ensure that what is received is also what is intended. So the task, both for the speaker and the listener, especially for the speaker, is to maximize understanding, to make your speech as clear as possible, to the language that you used, your line of reasoning, and finally your delivery. Fourth is the channel. Channel is the medium in which the message is sent. And in our society, certainly we have mediated channels. May not be direct, face-to-face. It might be mediated through technology. The richest channel, it's still face-to-face. You may get a whole lot from watching somebody on television or watching somebody on the internet, but it's not as rich as a face-to-face interaction where you are in the same room with the speaker. So when it's face-to-face, you are in a better position to judge those intangible qualities about the speaker's honesty, their ethics, their commitment to the topic, their trustworthiness, and their sincerity. The fifth element is feedback, and that's the messages the audience sends back to the speaker. Some of that feedback is immediate. It's applause, it's yawns, it's laughter, boos, some may even leave the room. And then there's delayed feedback that may come in the form of texts, letters, emails, phone calls, a formal evaluation, etc. The sixth element is noise. And that's anything that interferes with the communication process. So it may be physical noise, your neighbor speaking to somebody else, and you're trying to hear, but you can't because they're being too loud, a phone that's going off. It may be physiological noise where our senses fail us in some way. Maybe we have hearing loss, or maybe we have poor vision, or we stutter, we lisp, or we have uncontrollable tics. Psychological noise is what's in your mind. All those things that prevent you as the speaker or as listener, especially the listener, of listening well. And it may be you're hungry, maybe you are tired, maybe you are sick, maybe you had a fight with a significant other. Semantic noise refers to a disconnect between the speaker and the listener based on their word choice. Maybe words that are used are jargon that the audience doesn't understand. They may be inappropriate or offensive, or maybe ambiguous words. The seventh is the occasion. What is the reason for you gathering together and the speaker giving this presentation? The time, the place, the event, the traditions, both cultural and educational. So before a speech, the audience has an expectation. You've been invited to give a presentation and they expect certain things from you. So you need to know what they expect so you can meet those expectations. It helps you to better meet the needs of the occasion. The eighth element is the cultural context, and culture here is defined in terms of the norms, the rules that people follow in their relationships with each other. the values that we share in terms of what is right and wrong, what is good or bad, or what is desirable or undesirable. And then the custom, that's the practices about language and the things that we do culturally, really, in terms of customs. So culture often determines the common ground that the speaker and the audience has. If you're from the same culture, it's easier to give the presentation. You don't have to work as hard to develop some commonality between you and the audience. If you come from very different cultures, and that may be politically, religiously, socioeconomically, and not just racially, it's much harder to reach understanding. As a speaker, you should recognize that there are cultural differences between audiences, companies, families, institutions, and sometimes not only culture in the broad sense, but in terms of co-culture. And that is a group of moms versus a group of dads, a group of lawyers versus a group of physicians. These are all co-cultures. So if we want to be successful, we need to know something about our culture. And we need to be able to adapt. So analyze the audience and adapt to who they are. That's the second segment. The third segment now is steps for preparing to speak. And I'll have this in the next lecture.